How's everybody doing? Super excited to be here. I met Suzette, who I want to thank when I was in Miami at NAPP, which is a conference for digital distribution, and I was familiar with this festival. And since I've been here, I've met a lot of really creative, cool people, really talented people, and I want to say thanks for having me. I want to tell you a little bit kind of about who I am, since most of you don't know. I'm based in Los Angeles. I've been in the industry for about 16 years, and probably like many of you, I got into the industry in kind of a peculiar way, so I want to tell you about that. People ask me a lot, how did you become a producer? How did you start making television? How did you start making content? I'm originally from Austin, Texas. When I moved to LA, my first job was working for a guy named Rick Baker. Rick Baker has 7 Academy Awards for special effects makeup. So when I came out originally, that's what I wanted to do. But when you're young, you don't know much kind of about the industry. I've learned I still don't know much. But then especially, I did not. So I got a job working with Rick, making monsters, and had a lot of fun over there. Rick's done everything from Thriller to Men in Black, and you name it. So working there was really a blast, a blast, working with really eclectic, creative people. And, being the youngest guy there, what everyone in the shop would tell me is like, why are you working here? Why are you here with us? You don't want to be like us, do you? Which was ironic because, growing up and watching the movies, I thought, God, if I could just work in the movies and make effects, that would be so fun, right? But then when I started to do it, I realized that was just a small niche and the world was so much bigger. So I decided I wanted to be more involved and start producing. So I transitioned into producing and have since made tons of different stuff over the years. Now I run development for a company called Propagate Content in Los Angeles. My partners there are 2 guys, Ben Silverman and Howard Owens. Ben was a former head of NBC, Howard, the former president of programming at National Geographic. And I think collectively, the credits include everything from Jane the Virgin, Ugly Betty, The Tudors, Killing Kennedy, Cosmos, The Biggest Loser, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Jane the Virgin, lots kind of a different stuff. I've made lots of different shows over the years. I helped launch a show in the States called Face Off, which is going on season 13, which someone gave me a Critics' Choice Award for, thankfully. We kind of specialize in great ideas. Lots of companies do one type of thing. We like to work with people who are fiercely creative and help them take what they do to a global audience. So at Propagate, we've launched a number of different series. We've got about 15 series in production now. I'll tell you just a couple of the highlights. One of the projects that we're doing is coming out this fall. It's called Lore. It's on Amazon. I'm doing that with Gail Ann Hurd, who's the executive producer of The Walking Dead. Gail is somebody who I've admired for a long time. She helped create Terminator, so many awesome movies, so it's really a dream come true in working with her. Showrunner on that is a guy named Glenn Morgan, who is the executive producer of The X-Files. And that's a horror anthology that'll be out later this year. We're also doing Apple's first show called Planet of the Apps, which has been a lot of fun to do. That's with will.i.am, Jessica Alba, and Gwyneth Paltrow, and Gary Vaynerchuk. And so we sort of specialize in, innovative concepts. We're at a really unique time in television where I think anyone can find success. So I want to talk about that a little bit today, and then I'll get to the Q&A as soon as we can. I don't do anything particularly well except creative work. So I'm going to try to keep it simple today and communicate with you guys through emojis. If you would have told me 15 years ago that we would all be walking around with a television in our pocket, I wouldn't have believed you, right? But that's really kind of where we are. So to me, I've never been more energized to do what I'm doing. It's never been easier to find success. I'm going to try to not look at my notes too much, but right now I think I was fed a survey recently that said there's $570 billion at stake in the content market. So $570 billion for people like me and you to make content. And you know, when you think of a number like that, it's so fucking massive. And then I look at my friends who are like struggling to raise, you know, $500 on Kickstarter. So what I like to do is help people find a way to fund their projects and then kind of sell them around the world. So I'm just curious, by a show of hands here, how many people on some level are making money off the content that they're creating? Okay, cool. That's quite a few people. So I'm sure some of you guys know this, but content is in a really unique place where it's contracting and expanding at the same time. I was at VidCon earlier this year at a panel where I was watching a bunch of people from the biggest distributors in the world talk about content. And VidCon is a conference in LA, in Anaheim, that is mostly home to YouTubers. And so the room was packed. There's a few thousand people there, and I was listening to the panelists talk about content and talk about OTT, over the top, and SVOD, which is subscriber video on demand, and AVOD, which is advertiser on demand. And what really occurred to me in that moment was none of that really fucking matters at all. At all. And you know, with so much money at stake, I think there's a way for everybody to kind of get their piece of the pie. So I want to go into that in a little bit more detail. But the moral of the story, you know, I actively talk to Apple all the time, and Snapchat, and Facebook, who's moving into content, YouTube. I've got projects right now with Comedy Central and MTV, and I've heard here kind of people talk about the timing of content and the types of distribution methods, and all of that matters to me is shit. Because at the heart of what we all do is storytelling, and that has never changed ever. It hasn't changed since radio was invented. Sure, there's, you know, easier ways to do it, but kind of how we do it and what we do, it hasn't changed at all. And if you look at kind of the success and the biggest series out there right now, they're all made by people like me and you. There is no real secret to what any of them are doing. They're people who kind of locked themselves in a room and came up with a cool idea and then got together with their friends, wrote a story, turned the camera on, and made it. Certainly, some of them have more funding than you and I do, but the actual distribution method, I really don't think we should care about. I don't even think we should generally talk about it. Like, it's not, you know, Netflix's job and YouTube's job, all those places, their job is to just have a window where we can log on, but everything else is our job. They don't know what they want. If they knew what they want, they wouldn't need me and you, and I think they desperately need you guys. They need people who are fiercely creative and original, who want nothing more than to tell stories. I take pitches all day long, every day in Hollywood, and there's not enough people like you guys there. And to me, that's what makes kind of what we're doing here so exciting. And there's so much kind of possibility in the world. So here's an example. When I was starting out in the industry, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who's actually Canadian in LA, and there was a knock at the door. And I opened the door, and the guy's like, "Hey, I heard you guys out here hanging out, and I just wanted to introduce myself. Can I hang out with you guys?" And so I'm like, "Okay." And so, you know, I hang out with this guy for a little bit. He's very creative, I can tell right away, very passionate about what he does. And he's like, "Hey, do you like to make crank phone calls?" It's like, "Well, sure." He's like, "What about video games? You like video games?" I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Will you come upstairs? Like, let's make some crank phone calls." So I go upstairs in this guy's apartment. It's wall-to-wall video games, wall-to-wall comic books, And he goes right into making crank phone calls. I'm thinking, who the hell is this guy and where does he get this energy? So that guy went on to start a little series called Rick and Morty. His name was Justin Rowland. And I probably know 10 different guys like that. One of the first films I did in LA was this terrible Gary Busey vampire movie. And in addition to Gary trying to kill me several times on set, I met these really talented crew members who were making, nothing. And, several of those guys went on to win awards at Sundance and still make movies. And when I'm around people who are like truly passionate, I can see it in their eyes. And I can see why they found success, because they've never given up. And I think that's kind of the key for all of us to remember. Let me keep going here. So I want to give you a few tips about. Before we go on what to do, I want to give you a few tips kind of about what not to do. So yesterday I was in the speed pitching, and I heard a lot of really cool ideas. And I want to talk less kind of about that and more about pitches I get in LA and what makes some of them successful and what makes some of them not successful. So oftentimes people will bring me a pitch and they'll talk about a specific destination. Because I work with Apple, they'll bring me stuff specifically targeted for Apple. Or they'll bring me something specifically targeted for Spotify or somewhere else. And sometimes I'm guilty of this too. The number one common mistake I see made is people being derivative. They'll say, I've got, it's like Stranger Things, but they're Canadian. Or, it's like the OA, but they're it's more supernatural. And yesterday, when I was listening to kind of some of the best pitches, I thought, they're totally original. If your project is derivative or sounds derivative, I would totally throw it away and start over. No one wants to buy that. No one wants to see that. And when I was watching the stuff that was up here, I was thinking, well, so many of these are so cool and original. And that is really the basic formula to finding success in today's world. There's so many ideas out there, and there's just no way to rise above it if you're not original. I think another big tip is, you hear in the news a lot about the cloud. And I think we live in a world where everyone's in the cloud. No one really reads anything anymore, except maybe Donald Trump's tweets. But otherwise, no one really reads anything. And so when you're describing your project, it's so key to have a log line that really sells what it is and what's it about, and being able to do that expressively and clearly. Another key is just the design, the real. Yesterday I've heard a few ideas where people kind of apologize as they're pitching their project, and there's really no reason to do that. I've seen so many series launch from a conversation, from a paragraph, from a note on a napkin, and I saw people here with reels and concepts and pilots, and people seem so prepared, and that is really, really key, is making your projects desirable when you describe them and when you talk about them. I think another big key in talking about lore, for instance, which is something I'm doing with Amazon, that project is unique for a few reasons, but podcasting is this incredible loophole right now in the content world. And it's an incredible loophole because it's a really easy way to grab an audience, generate IP. So my friend Aaron Mankey started Lore now close to 2 years ago. And when Aaron started it, I think he had 9 downloads in the first episode. Now he's got close to 65. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. He's got close to 65. Sorry, I'm a diehard Lakers fan, which you're about to learn. Now he's got close to 65 million, which is incredible. And, that really did happen overnight. But why I love podcasting is it's a great way to generate IP. There's a huge ad base out there, a way to make money. Hold on. View, presenter view. there's a huge ad base, a huge way to make money, and a huge way to tell the stories that you want to tell. So yesterday I was talking to people, and they were saying, oh, it's so hard to raise money. Great writing, you know, to write short, you have to write long first, right? And I think podcasting is one way to do that, to generate an audience and help develop your style. And then for me, it's much easier for me to sell an idea and help you sell an idea if it's based off of something else. When things are, you know, completely original, without a huge star or without an added packaging element, it becomes incredibly difficult to sell it if it doesn't have another layer. So I think podcasting is certainly one way to do that. I saw a few true stories yesterday. That's also another way to do that. And then in talking to Suzette and some other people here, I've heard the discussion of like, what's the best timing for projects? And I think there's really no right or wrong way. Plan of the apps that we're doing with Apple is probably going to be really long form, like a traditional hour-long television show. But I do know that many of the other players that are buying from us right now want things as short as 5 minutes. And I think, to me, if I were you and I was making something new and original, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just make a great story and then, you know, work hard to find ways to package it. So in a lot of the things I've seen here, I haven't recognized a lot of the actors. I'm not from Vancouver, so certainly that can be part of it. There's a big trend in Hollywood that's changing right now with people who have social media presences. There's been a big prejudice against them acting in scripted stuff, and I think that's about to change in a big way. So I would encourage all of you guys to work on bringing in bigger casts with more visibility in social media is more important than ever if you want to find distribution. In cable, a lot of my friends recently have lost their jobs because of everything contracting. And in the next year, there's going to be an explosion of more destinations like Netflix taking on more and more content. So the things I'm seeing here, my eyeballs were about to jump out because there's so much great stuff here. It's really amazing the community that you guys have here in Vancouver and what you guys are cultivating. I think the writing here and the performing here is incredible. So I just want to encourage all of you guys, especially those of you seeking distribution, to keep doing what you're doing and keep reaching out because there's so many more places right now, part of that $570 billion pie, that are looking for people like me and you to place your stories out there. And I also would like to see if there's any questions out there. I'm happy to answer them. But we supply worldwide distribution to all types of projects and all types of shows. I think, you know, there's so much here that deserves to be seen by a broader market, and I would love to help you guys. So if there's any questions, please, now's the time, and we'll go from there.
Aside from chasing you when you leave here, what is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I have business cards, so feel free to shoot me an email. And I think that's actually a good question. A lot of my friends who are writers have a tendency to be introverts, and I think it's actually true with producers too. We're all kind of introverts. But what I have learned over time is that pretty much everyone in this industry loves to hear about new ideas. They love to hear about your project. So that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to buy your project, but you really never know. And how many of you guys here get annoyed when someone calls you on your phone? Anyone? Right? I sort of do, right? Sometimes. But it's so true. You know, just pick up the phone, call, whether it's if you're looking for a manager or you're looking for an agent. Right now, they're so desperate to find new content that if there's someone you're excited to work with, I would encourage you to go after it. And the same can be said for when you've got finished projects. You know, if you have a project that you think could really benefit from an EP, helping you, I would encourage you to reach out to them. Nowadays, you can find almost anyone on Twitter, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to exactly get your pitch to someone. There's really a million ways to do it, and if not, there's someone out there. There's so many managers I know right now looking for short-form scripted content. I would encourage you to reach out for those of you that don't already have representation, because this year there's just more and more stuff is going to be acquired. Any more questions?
Thank you. How do you foresee more short-form content making money?
Yeah, good question. I mean, right now there's more and more places who are willing to pay for it. You know, in the past 5 years, there's been a real kind of struggle as other than YouTube, there hasn't been a lot of places to buy that content. But I do know, you know, places like Facebook, places like Spotify, and then even Viacom, they're going to start acquiring more short-form content. I would encourage everyone to find a way to place your content online. I was talking to a guy here yesterday. He may be here. He had this idea for an Instagram series starring a pug. And I thought it was hilarious, but I thought that would be so cool to see on Instagram. I think, you know, knowing your audience can certainly be helpful, but, you know, nowadays there is more funding coming around. I also think, you know, I don't know if anyone here read Ted Hope's book on film, but he talked a little bit about the independent film distribution model and how he, as, you know, someone who's been to Sundance 15 or 20 times and been nominated for Academy Awards, how he and the people who made the film rarely benefited from it. And I hate that. I think, you know, to me, filmmakers, people like me and you, are the equivalent of musicians. And musicians get a thing called royalties, right? When their shows sell, they benefited from it. But historically, you guys have been cut out of that. And to me, that's really not cool at all. To me, if you're busting your ass and you're coming up with ideas and you're, you know, doing everything you can to make an incredible series that hopefully a lot of people like, you should benefit from that too. So when you are looking for distribution, I think it's really key to pay attention to the deal. You know, our company, for instance, we have a unique model where we try to sell everything globally around the world. So whoever we work with, we want them to share in that. So it really depends on who you're reaching out to and what your deal is, the destination that you're sharing it with, who's the second window for that destination, and how that's set up. And there's really a million types of deals that are made. But, you know, for me, I'm a capitalist, right? And I want my friends to make money off what they're doing as well. So I think you're going to see more and more people making money on short form than they ever have in the past. Certainly the YouTubers and the YouTube model has been one way, but I think it's opening up finally for the first time. I was with YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and I do know they're finally going to kind of open the door to people who don't have a million subscribers making original content and helping pay for that content. I don't think it's just going to be YouTube, it's going to be other places as well. That doesn't mean your project doesn't have to be great, it does, but I do think there's more and more opportunity than there ever has been.
Hi there. Do you have any idea about the new emerging virtual reality distribution platforms that are coming up now?
Sure. Can you say that one more time? Sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
Yeah. Do you have any idea about the virtual reality distributions? And it's just starting. It's re-emerging at this moment. Virtual reality.
VR. Yeah, I love VR. VR is still really tough. I mean, you know, Netflix is buying in VR now. There's a few places buying in VR, but largely, in my experience, it's still too early. You know, it takes special situations to get funded in VR. What I like about VR is that there's different ways to tell stories and innovate in storytelling, which gets me excited. But as far as making money on it, it is possible. Nothing is impossible, but much, much harder to do than traditional storytelling. You know, most of my friends that I know who are making money in that have done it by sponsorship or some other type of loophole. That, sponsorships are a great way to make anything, but it just requires more legwork. And, if you're like me and you've been producing where, half the time you're coming up with the content, you're taking out the trash, you're making coffee, you're finding actors, you're doing everything, finding sponsorships on top of that can be incredibly difficult. So while I do believe in content generally, the riches are in the niches, VR is not quite there yet. Any other questions?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Chad Riley. I'm just curious, when you guys are looking for content, is there a minimum or a maximum in terms of what we have? If I'm coming up to you and say, hey, I got this great script I wrote last night, what do you think of it? Or as opposed to saying, hey, listen, we've got a project we're working on for 3 years, we've got a demo, we've got 3 seasons written out. Is there a minimum or maximum? And tell me a bit more about that.
Great question. Can I have some water, if that exists? But I'll answer that question. It's really a case-by-case thing, and let me explain what that means. So if you just wrote Game of Thrones, and you come into my office and you say, I have an idea for, I'm in, right? That's all you need. But if you're completely unknown, chances are it's going to be much more difficult, right? So if you don't have prior credits or you haven't had prior success, the more you can organize and put together in a presentation, the better. And I think, a big part of what we do at Propagate is packaging. So here's an example at a bigger scale, and I think it applies as well to kind of people who are just starting out. So when I started working with the creator of Lore, I knew there was something really special there. The guy is so talented. He's an amazing storyteller. He's so kind, which I love kind people. They're easy to work with. But he had this great idea. We kind of wrote out a series together, and I thought, God, this is so special. And I want to make sure the eventual distributor understands how special this project is. Because if they understand how special it is, they'll give us a bigger budget to make it, right? So Gail Ann Hurd is an old friend and mentor of mine. I've pitched Gail 20 times. She's passed every single time. But I love her. And I think she's a genius. And so with Lore, I knew there was something special. So I set up a meeting with Gail, really led her through the show and what it is, and she loved it, right? So that added to the package of the show. I did that before I ever went to set up the meetings with the buyers. And sometimes in LA, this will happen where people will bring me projects. They'll say hey, I have this incredible idea, and I may think it's cool too, and my first question is, has it been out yet? And they'll say, well, I shared it with my friend who works at YouTube, or I shared it with this friend. Generally, if something's been out to the marketplace already, I don't want it, right? And so, because it means they've already passed on it. So what I try to do is make a package so special that it's you can't pass on it because it's got so many different ingredients. And I think the same can be said for people without any Hollywood connections, right? In addition to a log line, you want to have a great script. You want to make sure the script is better than any other piece of it. If you have a season written out, that's great. I mean, to me, that's a first place to start. And then if you're working with an EP or a production company or a manager, an agent, what they will probably do is encourage you to build it out even more and keep refining it. So it's a long way of saying it's a case-by-case basis, but the more you have, generally the better. I would also say, as a producer, I think that word is interchangeable with collaborator. That's really what producers do. They're collaborators. And that can happen on a number of different scales. One way they do that with someone like you might be giving you feedback on the script that you've made and helping you build out, a Bible or a deck or a treatment or a sizzle or whatever. And I would encourage all of you to be just receptive to collaboration. I don't have the emoji up, but I think it's the purple eggplant. Nobody likes to work with a dick. And it couldn't be more true, for what I do. I love working with people who are passionate, who are excited about what they do, and can help kind of fill in the gaps to get things over the hump. Getting your project distributed or made is not easy, but with enthusiasm, to me, that's like kind of the shortcut to everything. Any other questions?
You see videos and even web shows on things like YouTube, and let's say there's one that goes viral and they get 1 million hits, right? If they paid out money for that, if YouTube paid out money for that, they're going to do that, in my mind, from the advertising revenue they get off from that, the ads that they slap on the front of it or something like that. Could a sponsor conceivably pay $1 a hit to YouTube for that? Because I mean, $1 million really ain't a lot of money if you're going to start producing a series or something, and you're not going to get all of that. YouTube's going to get the lion's share of that, and you as a producer are only going to get a little bit of that.
Totally, that's a good point. If they paid $1 million, I mean $1 a hit, I think there's a lot of people who would be extremely rich. But unfortunately, they don't. However, they do. So the reason they don't do it that way, if I can articulate this, is virality happens every day. It rarely happens by the same supplier. So let's just use you as an example. Let's say tomorrow, you see a video of like a goat driving a Lamborghini and you capture it on film and it goes viral and everyone loves it. The chances of you doing that again in your life are extremely unlikely, right? So by the time you have a deal set up with YouTube, there's no way for you to repeat it. So what usually happens when people have a viral video is you're contacted by a company that specializes in distribution and exploitation of that. A company I work with sometimes they're called Jenkins Media, and they're based in LA. So when a video begins to go viral, what they'll do is contact whoever owns the video, whoever uploaded the video or captured the video, and they'll work out a licensing deal with you. And then so in addition to help you make money off of it on YouTube, they also exploit it to television and other distributors from all around the world. So the key is being aware of the power you have as a creator and not just saying like, okay, I'll take that for $5, right? Negotiating, I think, is something that doesn't come easy to a lot of people in this room, if I had to guess. But what I have learned is that, it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to just say, like, I think it's worth this. And you may not get what you want, but at least you'll have a conversation. So there are a lot of people making a lot of money off of YouTube. I know several who are doing it now. But what they do is make videos on a daily basis that are constantly getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of hits. And the way they get those hits is they've built up a huge community, a huge amount of subscribers who watch their videos. Sometimes they have stuff go viral on top of it, but they've got a built-in base. Certainly, the key when you have that base is to not fuck it up, like what happened with PewDiePie recently, if you guys are aware of that story. But any other questions?
Hi, thanks very much, by the way. This is fantastic. Now, my question is, a lot of marketers out there, or a few marketers out there, think they may have cracked the formula for what makes something popular in the online space. But in your experience, what is actually is there a formula or a few key things that are popular around the individuals that can make those things go viral?
I hope there's not a formula. To me, if there's a formula, like, content's dead. But certainly there are a lot of people who have built up a community who have a certain type of thing that they do. Earlier, many years ago, what happens is that when a formula becomes apparent, everyone copies it, right? Earlier in my career, I used to work with a really famous Canadian, actually, a guy named Tom Green. Does anyone know who Tom is? So Tom is hilarious and completely insane. And when he and I started working together, he liked to do things like put monkeys in a van and, you know, paint obscene sexual scenes on his parents' car. And, you know, Tom is so outrageous and fun, and when you're hanging out with him in the moment, it's not an act. That's just who he is. He's completely insane, which makes him so fun. He's like a human shot of tequila, right? But what happened after Tom became famous is that everyone copied what he did. Now, this is before YouTube, but you saw, like, Jackass. A lot of people don't know this, but the first season of Jackass, all the writers from the Tom Green Show, they were basically handed the writer's book, and that became the skits for Jackass. They were all originally written for Tom. So in what you're seeing on Instagram and YouTube is the same thing, right? Somebody, whether it's like unboxing videos, and everyone does that, and if you tomorrow were to do the first unboxing video for the iPhone 7 or 8 or whichever one comes out next, you'd probably generate a few 100,000 views because everyone copies what makes something successful. So I guess that's a long way of saying there's lots of formulas out there, but for series, I don't, you know, other than great storytelling and a good plot, I don't think there is a formula. Well, anyway, thank you, everyone. Such an honor to be here. I'm really excited by everyone I've met.